The air is sharp, thin, and cruel. Men move in silence, their breath turning to frost before vanishing into the grey. Each one carries a block of granite, heavier than his body, heavier than his hope. One step. Another. 186 times. They climb until their legs no longer belong to them. Some fall. The stones fall with them. And when one slips, the rest collapse, like dominoes made of flesh and bone. The guards don't shout orders. They laugh. Their laughter echoes through the pit, carried by the wind, swallowed by the walls. There are no guns here. No front lines. Just a staircase carved into the earth, and men sentenced to climb it until gravity wins. They call this place Mauthausen. Not a camp. Not a prison. A factory where death is the only finished product. The men are numbers now. No names, no families, no memories of who they once were. Only the next step. And the one after that. Until the stones they carry crush what's left of them. Each morning, the line begins again. Those who can still stand are given another block. Those who can't are left where they fall. By noon, the stairs are slick with blood and sweat. By night, the wind scrapes over the silence of bodies that won't rise again. This is not chaos. It's design. Someone planned every step, every inch of suffering, every reason to stop breathing. This is where the SS turned men into ghosts before they were even dead. They said the stones were for Hitler's grand buildings, monuments to his empire. But here, on these steps, the monuments were already being built. Not from granite. From graves. Before the first prisoner took a step, the ground had already been chosen. A quiet Austrian hillside, green, untouched, peaceful. Until the Reich arrived. In 1938, the swastika flags rose above the rooftops of Vienna. They called it the Anschluss, a bloodless union. But there was blood, it just hadn't been spilled yet. Hidden in these hills was granite. Hard, perfect, eternal. Hitler wanted to build an empire out of stone, walls, roads, monuments that would outlast every life beneath them. But stone is heavy. And free labor is cheaper than paid labor. So the SS came with trucks and orders. They brought the first prisoners from Dachau, men in striped rags, eyes already hollow from learning what a Nazi camp meant. Their job wasn't to serve time. It was to build the place that would erase them. Barbed wire rose around them. Towers sprouted like weeds. By winter, Mauthausen stood complete, built by the hands it would destroy. The SS didn't call it a camp. They called it Category 3, the highest level of punishment, reserved for enemies who would never leave alive. There was no mercy here, only quotas. How much stone a man could lift before he broke? How many would die before noon? Even death became a number, tallied on paper, filed away like factory records. The quarry fed the Reich, stone for monuments, roads for conquest. Every block carried up those stairs was a step toward Hitler's dream city. But the cost was measured in lives, not money. The men who arrived here stopped being prisoners. They became material, like the granite itself. Cold. Replaceable. Forgotten once broken. And above it all, the SS officers smiled. Because Mauthausen was working exactly as designed. The train screeches before dawn. No one knows where they are. The air smells of coal, sweat, and fear. When the doors slide open, light burns their eyes, a flash of grey sky, a forest of rifles. The guards shout in German. Dogs bark and leap against their chains. The men stumble out, one after another, blinking, coughing, clutching whatever they still have, a photo, a ring, a piece of home. They won't have it for long. The line moves fast. Clothes stripped. Belongings thrown into piles. Hair shaved, heads gleaming in the cold. The sound of scissors mixes with the barking of orders. Some weep quietly, others stare straight ahead, already empty inside. A man tries to speak, to ask a question. A rifle but answers first. He falls. No one helps him up. They've learned too quickly that mercy doesn't live here. The showers come next. Steam fills the room. But the water never warms them. When they step out, they are no longer men, they are numbers. A metal tag pressed into a trembling hand. A new identity carved into skin. Names are gone. Faces are gone. Only the number remains. The uniforms are striped, thin, damp, reeking of old sweat and rot. Some don't even fit. Most have no shoes. Their feet bleed against the stone, and the guards laugh when they limp. Inside the barracks, the air is thick with breath and disease. 300 men packed into a space built for 100. The bunks are wooden planks, no blankets, no rest. The latrine overflows, spreading sickness faster than prayer. And still, every morning, the whistle blows. They are marched out again, into the quarry, into the cold. Another day to climb, to fall, to vanish. This is their welcome to Mauthausen. A place where hope doesn't arrive and death never leaves. At Mauthausen, food was not nourishment. It was control. It was punishment. It was the slow, deliberate art of erasing a man from the inside out. Each morning, they received a crust of bread, black, sour, hard as bone. Sometimes moldy, sometimes crawling. They chewed it anyway. Because hunger was stronger than disgust. At noon came the soup. If it could be called that. Hot water with a few potato peels floating like ghosts of a meal. The lucky ones found a sliver of carrot, a trace of cabbage. The unlucky ones found nothing but the reflection of their own ribs. The guards watched as they ate, amused by the desperation. A man would trade his shoes for an extra spoonful. Another would steal from his friend, and later, from himself, until guilt became as sharp as the hunger. The body began to consume itself. Muscle faded first, then thought. Men forgot their own names, their own language. They stopped dreaming of escape and began to dream of bread. Just bread. When one died, the others searched his pockets, his sleeve, his hidden places, not for keepsakes, not for letters, but for crumbs. Even death had to be swallowed. The SS knew exactly what they were doing. A starving man does not rebel. He crawls, obeys, obeys again. Hunger was the silent guard that needed no uniform. At night, the smell of the kitchen drifted through the camp, cabbage, pork, real food, for the soldiers. The prisoners lay awake, eyes open in the dark, the scent torturing them more than the whips ever could. And in the morning, they rose again, bones wrapped in skin, hollow but alive enough to work. Because at Mauthausen, staying alive wasn't survival. It was the slowest way to die. Silence has a sound. At Mauthausen, it was the sound of things that should never have been quiet. The mornings began with noise, the whistle, the shouting, the dogs, the endless counting of numbers that used to be names. But once the men were gone to the quarry, once the stones began their climb, the camp itself fell into a strange stillness. A silence so thick it pressed against the ears like a weight. You could hear it in the barracks, the shallow breaths of the dying, the slow scratching of rats in the dark. You could hear it in the kitchen, where empty pots clanged like bells in a church that had lost its congregation. And you could hear it most of all in the air after a beating, when a body stopped moving and the guards walked away. The silence after the cruelty was always worse than the cruelty itself. At night, that silence changed shape. It became the sound of whispers. Men murmuring prayers they no longer believed in, calling out for mothers, for wives, for children they would never see again. Some sang, just fragments, broken lullabies that drifted between bunks like ghosts searching for warmth. Sometimes, from the hills, the echo of gunfire reached the camp. A warning that someone had tried to run. The guards said nothing. The men said less. Silence swallowed it all. And still, the quarry worked on. Stone after stone, life after life. Each death folded neatly into the next, unmarked, unnamed. The camp didn't need screams to remember what it was. It needed only the quiet, that terrible, endless quiet, that told everyone who survived that Mauthausen was not a place of sound, but of echoes. Because here, silence wasn't peace. It was proof that no one was left to speak. The gate said it all. Albeit marked free. Work will set you free. But every man who passed beneath those words knew, freedom was a myth carved in iron. At Mauthausen, work was death by design. The quarry stretched like a wound across the earth, 186 steps cut into the stone. They called it the Stairway of Death. Every morning, prisoners climbed it, shoulders bent beneath granite blocks heavier than their own bodies. One stumble meant disaster. A single slip, and the rock you carried would crush the man behind you. The guards watched with cigarettes and laughter. Sometimes they pushed. Sometimes they waited for nature to do it. And when the stone rolled, when men fell like dominoes down the staircase, the air filled with a sound more horrifying than gunfire, the sound of rocks meeting flesh. Those who survived the fall were made to climb again. And again. Until their legs became nothing but trembling sticks, their backs bent into question marks the world would never answer. At the top, there was no triumph. Only the cold satisfaction of survival. The men dropped their stones, collapsed into the dust, and waited for the next whistle, the signal to go back down. The SS called it labor. The prisoners called it the game of death. Because in Mauthausen, every breath was a wager. And the house always won. Some said the work kept them alive, gave them something to do, something to believe they could endure. But most knew the truth. Work wasn't meant to free them. It was meant to erase them. One stone at a time. One name at a time. And yet, every sunrise, they still climbed. Because in that climb, in that brutal, endless ascent, there was something even the Nazis couldn't destroy. The human instinct to keep moving, even when there's nowhere left to go. By winter, survival was no longer life. It was an instinct, cold, raw, stripped of reason. In Mauthausen, the bodies no longer looked human. Skin hung like paper. Eyes sank into skulls. Every face carried the same expression, exhaustion beyond emotion. The living envied the dead, not for peace, but for rest. The guards grew crueler as the Allies advanced. They sensed the end, and they wanted to take the world down with them. Orders turned into madness. Shoot anyone who slows down. Starve the sick. Erase the evidence. The prisoners understood. This was no longer about escape, it was about witness. Someone had to survive to tell the world what this place had done. There were nights when whispers spread through the barracks, talk of liberation, of American soldiers pushing closer. But hope was dangerous here. It made men careless. It made them stand a little taller, move a little slower. And in Mauthausen, hope could get you killed. Still, it grew. Even in the filth, even in the frost, it grew. Men shared crumbs of bread, traded body heat, prayed under their breath not for life, but for one more day. Because one more day meant the chance that someone might still be coming. When the first distant rumble of artillery reached the camp, no one believed it at first. The guards shouted, panicked. Some ran. Some fired blindly into the dark. But the prisoners didn't move. They stood there, hollow and trembling, staring toward the sound, not with joy, not yet, but with disbelief. They had been in hell too long to recognize deliverance when it came. And as dawn broke, lighting the smoke above the camp, one truth settled in their bones. Survival wasn't victory. It was the price they would pay forever for living when so many did not. The gates of Mauthausen opened on May 5, 1945. The men who walked out were free, but not whole. They carried no weapons, no vengeance, only the weight of memory. Behind them lay the silence of those who never made it down the stairway. And ahead, a world that would never truly understand what it meant to survive. They said the war was over. But for the ones who lived through Mauthausen, it never really ended. Because history doesn't fade. It waits, in stone, in smoke, in silence. And it asks us one question. Will we remember? Subscribe, because some stories should never die with the silence that tried to erase them.